Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Here are the stories we're following today.
Karen, this action in the market this morning follows a big reversal in markets yesterday. After gaining almost 2% earlier in the session, the S&P 500 closed down 0.8%. The rapid slide followed a weak $42 billion sale of treasuries. Chad Oviatt, Director of Investment Management at Huntington Private Bank, says now is the time to put your money to work.
We've been telling our clients not to be overcashed, right? The one thing that we know for certain is that as interest rates start to go lower, whether that's because of market activity or Fed activity, cash yields are going lower. So if you have cash, be dollar cost averaging and look to those markets where you can get in on some of those dips, be a long-term investor.
Huntington Private Bank's Chad Oviatt says stocks also came under pressure yesterday because 17 blue chip companies offered almost $32 billion of debt. That's the highest amount of U.S. investment grade issuance this year.
Well, Nathan, 3/4 of the global carry trade has now been unwound. That's according to JPMorgan's quant strategists, who say the week's volatility has wiped out year-to-date returns and cut into the past 2 years of profits. Mark Cranfield from our Markets Live team says the Japanese market, one of the homes of the carry trade, is still not stable.
It's a dysfunctional market you're seeing in Japan, and that's not too surprising when you consider the extreme volatility you've seen in the past week. It's really a market currently of headless chickens. People are just chasing everything, every headline, every nuance. So in terms of expecting volatility to die down, unlikely. We're going to have plenty of it, and we've got U.S. elections coming as well. People are just going to get used to it.
Bloomberg's Mark Cranfield says the carry strategy involves borrowing at low rates to fund purchases in higher-yielding assets elsewhere.
Well, Karen, the odds of a recession in the U.S. are increasing. That's according to JPMorgan Chase. The firm now sees a 35% chance that the economy tips into recession by the end of this year. That's up from 25% as of the start of last month. Still, economist Nouriel Roubini says the market may be getting ahead of itself on expecting aggressive rate cuts from the Fed. He says the central bank is right to signal a soft landing.
The markets are often wrong about what's going on with the economy and what the Fed is going to be doing. There is some significant, evidence of some slowdown of the economy, but I don't think the data suggests that we're going to have a hard landing anytime soon. If anything, actually, there's some elements of strength in the economy.
Nouriel Roubini is known as Dr. Doom for predicting the 2008 global financial crisis.
Well, Nathan, there are several stocks on the move this morning. We'll start with shares of Bumble. They're down more than 35%. The dating app company is slashing its annual revenue outlook, and we get the numbers from Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
Bumble says annual revenue will grow between 1 and 2% from the previous year. The company had previously forecast growth of between 8 and 11%. Wall Street was expecting an 8.4% gain, according to Bloomberg compiled estimates. The company's third quarter forecast and second quarter results also broadly missed the mark. Bumble, which went public in 2021, saw its shares hit a record low in February after it shared a weaker than expected sales outlook and cut around a third of its workforce. In New York. Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Charlie, thanks. And shares of Warner Brothers Discovery are down nearly 12%. The parent of CNN and the TNT cable network posted a second quarter charge of more than $9 billion after writing down the value of those traditional TV networks. The company was created in 2022 when Discovery acquired Warner Media. It has concluded the cable channels are no longer worth what they were when that $42 billion merger was completed.
Well, Nathan, investor Kathy Wood is trying to take advantage of the recent stock market sell-off. She scooped up shares of tech firms just as her flagship fund sank to a new 2024 low. Wood's ARK Innovation ETF bought Amazon, Advanced Micro Devices, and Roku. A fintech-focused fund of her firm ARK Investment Management also added Reddit and Meta Platforms.
Now let's turn to the latest in the presidential race, Karen. It is now a sprint through the key battleground states for Vice President Kamala Harris and her new running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz.
Donald Trump, he sees the world differently than we see it. He has no understanding of service because he's too busy servicing himself.
Governor Walz spoke there in Detroit, Michigan, as his opponent for the vice presidency, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, tailed the Democrats. He spoke with reporters by her plane, of Harris's plane, Air Force Two, near Eau Claire, Wisconsin.
We think it's important to get out there, to talk to people, to make the best case that we can. And obviously there's an element of, especially local media is going to cover her because she's a vice president and a presumptive nominee. So we think it's important to have a counter narrative here, and importantly to drive home this point that she has been a dangerous radical.
And after J.D. Vance's appearance on the Harris-Walz trail, a Harris campaign spokeswoman posted on X, "This is getting weird."
And Nathan Ness's vice president campaigns through the key battleground states. President Biden says he is not confident there'll be a peaceful transition of power if former President Trump loses in November.
He means what he says. We don't take him seriously. He means it. So look what they're trying to do now in the local election districts where people count the votes. They're putting people in place in states that they're going to count the votes, right? You can't love your country only when you win.
President Biden spoke to CBS News in his first interview since he ended his re-election bid last month. The full interview will air on CBS Sunday morning, which can be heard on Bloomberg Radio in New York, Washington, D.C., and Boston Sundays at 10 a.m.
And Karen, Delta Airlines has been hit by a class action lawsuit. The airline is accused of failing to properly refund flyers or provide them with meals, hotels, or transportation vouchers after CrowdStrike's software outage last month caused widespread delays and cancellations.
And it's time now for a look at some of the other stories making news in New York and around the world. For that, we're joined by Bloomberg's John Tucker. John, good morning.
And good morning, Karen. Tropical storm Debbie has made a second landfall in South Carolina on its way up the East Coast, where residents as far north as Vermont could get several inches of rain this weekend. Bloomberg meteorologist Rob Carolyn is tracking the storm.
John, the circulation associated with what's left of Debbie continues to produce very heavy rain over portions of the Carolinas, and this will be spreading into Virginia today. We're looking at numerous flash flood watches and some warnings from northeastern South Carolina across North Carolina, then up along the Appalachians all the way into central New York.
Debbie came ashore early this morning near Bulls Bay, South Carolina. Taylor Swift's Eras Tour has been canceled in Austria after officials announced the arrest of two men they accused of plotting a terror attack. Authorities say a 19-year-old Austrian citizen who had recently pledged allegiance to the Islamic State focused on the Eras Tour as a potential target. Nearly 200,000 people had been expected to attend the Vienna concerts, which were to start today. Bad news if you're looking for a deal on an apartment. The Manhattan rental market's still sky high. More from Bloomberg's Denise Pellegrini.
The average rental price in Manhattan, $5,146 a month in July. The average rental price did fall from a year ago, but that's just because the size of the average apartment being rented fell. And forget about signing incentives in Manhattan. Deals offered by landlords plunged, and some new tenants paid above the list price. And if you were hoping to get a better deal in Brooklyn or Queens, forget about it. The price per square foot of apartments in those places also rose. Denise Pellegrini, Bloomberg Radio.
Iran's president telling his French counterpart, Emmanuel Macron, the U.S. and Europe must urge Israel to accept a truce in Gaza to reduce tensions in the Middle East. The comments hint at a diplomatic path to de-escalation as Israel braces for retaliation after the killing of a top Hamas leader in Tehran. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm John Tucker, and this is Bloomberg. Nathan and Karen.
All right, John, thank you. It's time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update with John Stashower. John, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. As the Olympics start to wind down, big day in Paris. The 200 meters with American Noah Lyles. He already won the 100 in that thrilling finish. This is considered his stronger event. And the men's basketball semifinals as the U.S. taking on Nikola Jokic and Serbia. U.S. beat the Serbs in an exhibition game and in group play, and both wins were by 26 points. U.S. women into the semis. Win over Nigeria makes it 59 Olympic wins in a row. They'll play Australia tomorrow. Quincy Hall's come from behind, gold medal in the 400 meters. The third time an American runner has won gold with a rally at the end. Lyles did it. So did Cole Hocker in the 1,500 meters. Hall was in fourth place around the last bend. It's the first U.S. gold in the 400 since 2008. In Denver, Mets and Rockies tied 2-2, ninth inning.
First pitch. Line to left field. Base hit by Lindor. Bader scores. Here comes Gavel around third. He will score. The throw is cut off at third. Francisco Lindor with the bases loaded. Drives in two. It is 4-2 Mets in the top of the ninth.
On WCBS, Mets won 5-3. Another strong start for the new Met, Paul Blackburn, his second in a row. The Mets only half game behind Atlanta. for second in the NL East. Yankees and Orioles again tied for first. Yanks split 2 with the Angels at the stadium. They won 5-2 behind Luis Gil. He got his 12th win. The Angels then won 8-2 with a 6-run second inning off Yankee rookie Will Warren. Baltimore won 7-3 in Toronto. Red Sox lost 8-4 at Kansas City. The Giants won 7-4 in Washington. The football Giants host the Lions tonight in the preseason opener. The two teams had 2 fight-filled joint practices. The NFL fined both teams $200,000. Rafael Nadal announced he won't play the U.S. Open next month. He will play the Laver Cup. That might be the last event of his career. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports. Karen, Nathan.
Coast to coast on Bloomberg Radio, nationwide on SiriusXM, and around the world on Bloomberg.com and the Bloomberg Business app. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager on another morning of volatility in the global market as the debate over central bank policy decisions around the world feeds into investor anxiety. Joining us now from London is Bloomberg stocks reporter Joe Easton. And Joe, between the worries about whether the Fed's waited too long to cut and the unwind in the carry trades after the Bank of Japan's surprise hike, where do things sit now? Good morning.
Yeah, morning, Nathan. So, I mean, the thing I've been waiting to see is a rebound in stocks, but we're just not really seeing that at all. We're seeing yesterday in the US, we saw a bit of a gain at the open, then a decline, faded away in Europe. Every morning we seem to be opening very slightly higher and then giving up the gains. The market really not willing to bet on a rebound as such. Stocks pretty much down around 5% over the past week, both in Europe and the US. And we're just not seeing investors to buy back in. Maybe they're going to wait for a bit more data. Obviously, later we get the US jobless claims. That could be important in terms of the numbers, but we really need some kind of trigger for markets to actually turn, and we're not just seeing that at the moment.
Well, where you sit in Europe, we're continuing to see some pretty deep selling. What's driving that?
Yeah, so I think earnings have been largely negative here in terms of the large cap companies. Today we had some big names like Siemens. We also had a bunch of insurers kind of just being a bit slow in terms of where their growth are. Siemens was talking about customers cutting back on orders, being slow to put new orders in. That had a kind of read across the entire European industrial space. The bank numbers haven't been particularly strong. Obviously, interest rates fading, coming down will be negative for them. So we're just seeing just a bit of negativity. But you've got to also bear in mind that volumes are lower, of course. A lot of people on holiday, a lot of the traders I chat to, they're all of them red dotted on the terminal today where they're just out. So the liquidity and the volume in the market is low, and therefore disappointment on things like earnings and data is just causing a bit more selling in these markets.
Now, in terms of what's driving the broader market, a lot of it's been driven by the global unwind in the carry trade after the Bank of Japan's move. The folks over at JPMorgan Chase are saying now they think it's about 75% done. Could we expect some of this volatility to subside once this carry trade unwind fully shakes out?
Yeah, I did see the JPMorgan update. That was pretty interesting, as you say, given a lot of that trade potentially has now been closed out. It kind of depends on how much losses were booked there and how much leeway people have to buy back into other trades in terms of buying back into stocks, whether they'll just have to kind of hold their positions there. That might kind of be wrapped up. So I don't think that will be the main trigger. I think we'll need to see data. Interestingly, the US numbers next week will get US inflation, but that's kind of taken a kind of second step in terms of the importance. Now, the market more focused on growth. We'll get some S&P indexes in terms of the survey numbers next week, the ISM numbers as well later in the beginning of next month. So those are kind of the key data that we'll wait for. I don't really think the Japan issue is going to be key. It's more going to be about whether US economic growth continues to slow, whether the Fed's taken too long to lower rates, as you say, and also the earnings story. Will markets continue to reward companies for doing well, or are they too concerned about economic growth? That's the bigger issue for me at the moment.
And to your point about the data dependence, in between all those data points you mentioned is the jobless claims coming out this morning. After all that betting about whether the Fed's behind the curve after last week's disappointing jobs report, I mean, what kind of volatility could we see just from this next upcoming data point?
Yeah, I'm excited to see that. That'll be coming up, as you say, at 1:30 my time, 8:30 your time. So 187,000, I think, was the call for continuing claims. We'll see where that actually lands. I think that given the sensitivity that you mentioned there, it could be a key data point. I mean, US futures pretty much lower on the S&P at the moment. Maybe people are going to position ahead of that. Just wait to see what that number looks like. If it's a decent number, maybe we see a bit of a rebound. You would expect that to be the case, but at the moment, maybe people waiting for those jobless claims numbers. Definitely going to keep me glued to my screen later this afternoon.
And in terms of where we sit now on rate cut betting, are we still thinking that there could be a possibility of an emergency rate cut? Are we still betting on aggressive moves from the Fed? Got about 30 seconds left.
Yeah, no, I think for me, I think traders unfortunately tend to overplay how much the Federal Reserve and other economists do actually look at financial markets. They're more interested in economic data. For me, I don't think we'll see an emergency cut. They'll have to wait for the next meeting. I think that the Fed, like all central bankers, are more focused on the macro numbers rather than, a 5% decline in the S&P 500.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Today, your morning brief on the stories making news from Wall Street to Washington and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed at 6 a.m. Eastern each morning on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning starting at 5 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 106.1 in Boston, and Bloomberg 960 in San Francisco.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
Plus, listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, SiriusXM, the iHeartRadio app, and on Bloomberg.com. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak.